What's up, everybody? Welcome back to SSPN Live. It's good to be with you guys. It's been a minute since we last talked. The last time that we had a stream going was right before the Milwaukee Bucks game, where the Spurs unfortunately put up one of their worst performances of the season overall. Obviously, the Bucks are the Bucks as well, and Giannis did his thing. But our last stream, we were having a little bit of hope for maybe a competitive game, and unfortunately, that's not what we got. And speaking of unfortunate things, the fires in LA, obviously want to send our thoughts and prayers to any Spurs fans or anybody in general that's been affected by that. And so the game on Saturday against the Lakers was postponed. But while there still are, really sad things going on in that area, they are able to start getting events going again. So the Spurs were able to play the Lakers this past Monday. And that was a 9:30 game when I was in the middle of working 5 days 5 days in 6 days. So five shifts in 6 days. So I did not stay up and watch that one because I had to go to bed to get ready for work the next day. But when I looked at the box score after when I went to bed and it was halftime, it didn't look like the Spurs were playing too well. And you told me yourself you were able to catch the first half of that game, and that was your sentiment as well. But I was happily surprised to wake up to a 126-102 victory against the Lakers, especially with the first two matchups against the Lakers this season. Ethan, I know you weren't able to catch the second half of that one, but what are your thoughts on that win against the Lakers this week in blowout fashion in the second half?
Yeah, first half is the only thing I got to watch in real time. I had to get up at 5 a.m. the next day, so but that first quarter was competitive, and then that second quarter, it looked like the Lakers were turning it on. Anthony Davis was really physical with Wemby. He actually finished the night with 30 points, 13 of 18 overall, with 13 rebounds as well. And it just felt like, okay, this is one of those games where the Spurs are going to get outclassed.
Mm-hmm.
Physicality on the inside, the veteran understanding and high IQ. They got a young team, so they were going to put their foot on our throats and just kind of close out the game. So I turned it off, and I was like, all right, let's write it off as an L. But that second half, I mean, it was three guys really. It was Stephon Castle, Devin Vassell, and Victor Wembanyama, each with 23 points, able to kind of lead the way for the Spurs. And when you get 10 points from Keldon off the bench, 17 from Harrison Barnes is kind of a bonus. We were able to pull it out, and it just looked like defensive intensity, Jude, was turned up in that second
Mm-hmm.
half. We were able to fluster the Lakers a little bit. I think there was like three possessions back to back to back that led to fast break dunks for the Spurs. There was the Victor windmill dunk in transition, and all those things combined, we were able to actually pull out a win, which is crazy because we haven't been able to do that as of late. It feels like we usually give up in the second half and aren't able to execute down the stretch. This was the exact opposite of the typical second half game for the Spurs.
Well, and that issue happened in the next game that we'll talk about here next against the Memphis Grizzlies. But just to harp on this one, as much as me and Ethan didn't get to see the best part of this game when the Spurs won the third quarter 36-27 and then dominated the fourth quarter to pull out this win 37-13. I think that really tells the story when you talk about the defense in this one in the second half.
Hmm.
Now, when I look at the box score here, let's see what the turnover numbers are. You got 19 turnovers for the Lakers and 10 for the Spurs. So
Hmm.
maybe some of those were self-induced by the Lakers that kind of gave us some opportunities, but still you got to capitalize off that. And I'm sure a lot of those were, just off of plays being made by the Spurs. If you look up there back at the box score, 2 blocks from Keldon Johnson, a steal from him, 2 steals from Trey Jones, a steal from Charles Bassey as well, 4 steals from Chris Paul, 3 steals from Victor, along
Mhm.
with 2 blocks. So I could go down the list on the steals numbers there, but a lot of those were just straight up us taking away possessions from them. And this is probably one of our better defensive performances in a little bit, Ethan.
No, most definitely, and a lot of that has to be attributed, I think, to Mitch Johnson, and that halftime speech must have been crazy for us to come out with that much focus on that side of the floor.
Yeah, and Alejandro Morales giving us a little bit of context. He says it was the back-to-back dunks that completely killed any hope and momentum from
Mhm.
LA, and I'm sure that was at some point in the second half. But the last thing I wanted to say defensively as well, if you've been paying attention to just kind of around the league, or maybe you play some fantasy basketball like your boy,
Mm.
guys like Austin Reeves and Max Christie have actually been shooting and
Yeah.
playing really well for the Lakers. So to keep them at 4 for 13, 4 for 11, Dalton Connect, he killed us in one of the games we played them earlier this season. He went 1 for 5 as well, 1 for 4 from Dorian Finney-Smith, 1 for 7 from Cam Reddish off the bench. Basically the only guys who shot well for them, you could say Rui, but he didn't. He only had 9 points. And then other than that, it was LeBron and AD. And that's how you beat the Lakers, because LeBron and AD are going to be LeBron and AD. But if we can have a complete team offensive performance like we did here and kind of just keep the rest of the Lakers in check, that's something that we haven't been able to do in the past 2 games this season, Ethan.
Right. And I think, Devin Vassell, you look at him specifically, 5 for 9 from 3. This is the game that we were kind of wanting to see from him all year long. Like, if he can consistently shoot at this rate, then we're good. 50% from the field and 5 of 9 from 3. I'll take that every single night. And then Stephon Castle limited to just 2 turnovers, and then being physical and aggressive getting to the rim is what I like to see. He took 4 threes, but he took 16 shots. So that means he took 12 twos, which is what I like to see. And he got a couple dunks as well. And Victor, just consistently doing Victor things.
Absolutely. The last thing I'll say on this game with Devin, I hate to keep harping on this, Ethan, but this is what we've been saying for a couple years now. Devin Vassell at his peak is around 20 points, 5 rebounds, 5 assists. And what do you see in this game? 23 points, 4 assists, 6 boards. Then you also got a couple steals in there as well. This is on efficient shooting. That's Devin Vassell at his best right there. But still need to see some more consistency in that area. But it's picking up these past couple games. Even this loss that we'll get into next, it was another solid performance from Devin.
For sure.
But yeah, let's jump right into that Grizzlies game. Once again, not as positive of a second half here for the San Antonio Spurs. And of course, the highlight is Ja absolutely posterizes Wemby with dunk after the whistle. I like how they start it with the first sentence. And don't get me wrong, even you know us, we're the last people who want to admit that dunk was insane. But even I'm gonna sit here and say that was freaking crazy, even though it didn't count. I'm really glad it didn't count though. That's the most important part for me.
In my head, I really wanted to say oh, Victor heard the whistle, so he didn't jump. Like if we continue with that play, then it's it's a different situation. But that's Ja Morant. You got to give him credit. He dunks on literally everybody.
Yes.
So I'm not mad about that one.
Absolutely. And yeah, this game, it's really the opposite of the Lakers game. We got out to about a 10-point lead at halftime. I believe it might have been an 8 or 9-point lead with some free throws and stuff like that. Like 61-69 is, I believe, what the score was going into the second half.
It's a 12-point lead.
Yeah, or 12-point lead. There you go. Thank you for correcting me. But as you see in the third quarter, 43-25 for the Grizzlies, and then 35-27 in the fourth. I do want to give the guys credit. We did make a little bit of a counter run to cut it to a 1 to 2 point game midway through that fourth quarter, or kind of in the latter second half with about 4 minutes left. But right when we did that, Taylor Jenkins calls a timeout, and the Grizzlies go back to doing what they were doing beforehand to get a 14-point win here over the Spurs. I was able to catch this one in full, Ethan. I'll dish it to you here in a second. And I already texted you this, so you already know what I'm about to say here. But I hate to oversimplify this game, because definitely the second half execution has been a theme for the Spurs this year in an area where they need to improve. But really, I think when you look at this game, Victor Wembanyama shooting 5 for 19 is the true reason that the Spurs lost this game. I'm not saying that to blame Victor, because with the way that he's playing, like, everybody's going to have an off shooting night every once in a while. Like, literally every star player does. Every generational player even has those. So that's going to happen every once in a while. But again, when you just look at the performance from everybody else in this game, you got 21, 5 rebounds, 3 assists, another 2 steals from Devin Vassell on efficient shooting, over 50% from the field and from 3, or right at 50% from 3. And while maybe it wasn't the most efficient night from Stephon Castle, got to the line, went 6 for 7 from there, put up 26 points on an off night from Victor. And then you got 17 from Keldon off the bench on 50% shooting as well as some other guys in double digits. Really well, Harrison Barnes, and obviously Victor. But aside from Victor with his shooting night, Harrison Barnes is really the only other person to get into double figures. But I just feel like if we get this performance from the rest of our team, and Victor plays like Victor normally does, like 99% of the time, this is a win.
For sure. And I think you also need to give the Grizzlies a lot of credit as well. because this is kind of their identity, right? They're the grit and grind Grizzlies. They play too big. Zach Edey, Jaren Jackson Jr. They have size off the bench with Brandon Clark, Santi Aldama, and even their wings and their guards. They're strong, versatile guards. I think of Jalen Wells having a switch on Wemby. Desmond Bane is short, but he's strong and he can get up into Wemby and kind of make his life a little bit harder. So I would envision this next game will be different for Victor. Like this feels like a bounce back game offensively for him. And we can just only hope that Stephon Castle gets close to that 26-point mark, which is his career high. Devin Vassell played well in this game, like you said. I feel like CP played pretty well as well, despite only having 8 points, 5 assists, 5 boards. And yes, this is my last point. The exact comment you just brought up from T-Lop. We do need Jeremy Sohan back so bad. I don't know if he solves the problem, but he definitely adds a little bit more physicality, a little more size, a little more, I don't want to say dirty, but grit and grind style
For
of
sure.
play to kind of combat the Grizzlies um, and take some of the pressure off of Victor, both as a ball handler, as a defender, and as a big inside that's going to fight for
Yep.
those extra possessions and rebounds.
Absolutely. I mean, you hit the nail on the head on the Jeremy point. The one thing I do want to say though, as much as you can, simplify this game a little bit to if
For
Victor
sure.
shoots better, the Spurs at least, are down to the wire in this one. The other thing is if Santi Aldama doesn't get 20 and 10
True.
off the bench as well, and also even Jay Huff, you can throw into that category as well with 11 points. We let him get some open shots. And Luke Kennard, I mean, sometimes Luke Kennard is just going to do what he did right there. But I mean, even Luke Kennard got 9 boards. Maybe I'm just a little ignorant of Luke Kennard's rebounding.
Mm.
Maybe that's something you could improve on there a little bit. But the point I was getting to with Luke Kennard is he's a very JJ Redick like player where
Mm-hmm.
sometimes he's just going to get 15 shooting. So that one I'm not as, what I mean,
For sure.
worried about. But the Santi and the J Huff, both of them getting 31 points combined, that's also something that can improve. The bench defense definitely could have been better.
What I love about the Grizzlies, I know this is a Spurs show, but what I liked most about their team is that their starting lineup is like physical grit and grind. We're going to get in the paint. We're going to punch you in the mouth. And then off the bench, they have a bunch of guys that can play like kind of Golden State ball, where they're running
Mhm.
nothing but dribble handoff, screen and roll, and getting wide open threes with Laravia, Aldama, Huff, Kennard. And Brandon Clark is kind of an undersized, still physical, but undersized, big like a Draymond that can make the right pass, fight for boards too. So they can kind of play both styles. And I feel like the Spurs just like as soon as they grew accustomed to one style, they brought in the bench and they
Uh-huh.
were like completely different. And we could just never find that correct adjustment. And then on top of that, like you keep saying, not to simplify it, but Victor didn't shoot well. So
Yeah. One thing I do want to say about Victor, though, 8 blocks in this game,
oh yeah,
man. He did get dunked on by Zach Edey. That was actually like a real dunk that did count.
that
So,
was
like, I
nice.
got to admit that one. But after that, he swatted him like 3 or 4 times too.
He
So,
did.
definitely was motivated by that one. And I'm sure overall with this performance, Ethan, Victor is going to be very motivated for the game tonight back in San Antonio in this rematch with the Memphis Grizzlies, which we'll get into right now. What are your thoughts on the keys to victory tonight in this one?
I think you got to get Victor Wembanyama going. I think you need to get his jump shot going early. I feel like you just got to feed him at the mid post area and let him just get a groove because in that first Grizzlies game, they were being physical. They were getting inside of him. He can't over dribble. I think that's absolutely the key. And then off the bench, Keldon Johnson needs to play just as well as he played last time. And we
Mhm.
just need a little bit more energy from the rest of the guys. Team rebounding, team physicality. I'm not even talking about points like Julian, Bassie, Trey, even if Zach gets a few minutes. We just need them to gang rebound and set some killer screens and bring the energy that the Grizzlies brought last game.
Yeah, for sure. I don't y'all might see my dog just walked in. You can probably see his tail
I
right
do. I
there in,
do.
like, the corner. He
Is
just
that the new
invaded.
dog?
He invaded. That's the new one, yes. Oh my goodness. We've got Winky, and now we got Shipley. I can't pick him
Hmm.
up. He's not as small, but I might have to if you see some stuff in the background, that's what's going on there. Um, But yeah, I got a little bit distracted because we got a super chat here from my guy Rain in the chat. He says Jay almost Morant with another fake poster.
Hmm.
Love to see it there.
Love it.
And
Thank
we
you, Rain.
always appreciate the
For sure.
super chats as well. I feel like there's another Ja has had a couple of those though, where it's like
Posters on
they
us?
have no, 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 like where they haven't counted. Like
Oh,
there's
for sure.
he's had a couple other of those after the whistle.
100%. He's just a freak athlete, dude. I think he's probably the best athlete, or at least pure jumper in the league today.
I can't. I've
And
always
Edwards is a close second.
I've always liked the Grizzlies since the Ja Morant era has started. Like on the court, I know there's all the off the court stuff, but like
Mhm.
watching them, they have been so fun to watch. Like since those playoff runs that they had a couple years back, they've definitely got a good core, and they've added to it more. In the years where they've had to kind of take a step back with the injuries and stuff like that. But looking at the injury report tonight, nothing really too much. I mean, Ja's going to be a game time decision. I'm sure he's going to play. Jeremy Sohan's still out. And Marcus Smart, as well as Vince Williams Jr., still out for the Memphis Grizzlies. Cam Spencer as well, but he's not somebody who is regularly in their rotation. But when it comes to the keys to victory for tonight, Ethan, I think once again it really all starts with Victor. But I think we're going to need another game from guys like Devin Vassell, guys like Keldon Johnson, even a Harrison Barnes or a Chris Paul. We're just going to need other guys in the rotation to step up and have close to 20 points or be in double digits. Even with Victor playing better, we're still going to need the supporting cast we're going to need multiple guys in double figures to get a win tonight.
Yeah, if we're planning on out shooting the Grizzlies, and that's a perfectly fine plan, we're gonna have to get some extra possessions because if they're not hitting our shots, then we're not gonna be able to get those rebounds. When they have so many bigs inside, and Victor's the only one that's taller than 7 feet. You know what I mean? Um,
Especially with Jeremy out.
so there has to be some kind of wrinkle. And you know what? I'm going to trust Mitch Johnson here because that was the first game we actually saw Memphis. And a lot of our guys hadn't actually played against Ja Morant in a long time because of last season and all the difficulty there. So I'm expecting a Spurs win in game 2 against the Grizzlies, Jude.
Okay, let's go. I like it. I am too because I just think Victor's going to play better, and I think the team's going to want some get back
For sure.
with the way that the second half went. Like the fact that they got back into it after getting beat 45-27 or whatever it was in the third
Mm-hmm.
quarter, and then it kind of floundered again. They're going to be super motivated to get the win tonight. But it is only their second time playing the Grizzlies. I don't know. Maybe this is just a matchup thing where they're able to. It kind of plays out similarly.
Hmm.
But that's just kind of the devil's advocate point if we don't want to go, full Spurs positivity. But I really think objectively, this will be a bounce back spot for the Spurs tonight. Like the Grizzlies -2.5, like them being favored, but just by a 3. I think that's fair, and I think the Spurs will be able to cover.
You know what? I'm going to say something very controversial here, Jude.
Go ahead.
Let's play Zach Collins tonight.
No. I was actually about to get Wemby's Castle was talking about Charles Bassey, and that was
Mm-hmm.
the other thing that I wanted to get to was that Charles Bassey looked so solid on Wednesday night.
He did. Let me explain why.
Okay, go ahead. Yeah, I'll hear you out.
Grizzlies talk trash. They're
Okay,
physical.
true.
I don't even want him to play that long. I just want him to start some stuff and get the energy going in the right direction for the Spurs. And then you can put Charles Bassey in there.
So just have him go in and get a tech and
Pretty much.
have him go in and get ejected
Just start something.
and just start the mood. Yeah, I'm with you.
This
I'm
is
with
the
you.
only reason we have you on the team anymore, if we're being honest.
Let's get Zach and Jeremy tonight. Let's get them both ejected without playing any minutes.
That would be great.
We need to fight the Grizzlies. Let's go.
And maybe some Blake Wesley minutes would be lovely. I
Oh
doubt
my
that
goodness.
happens, but
Yeah, that won't happen. Actually, speaking of that too, Trey actually played pretty solid in the last game. Maybe he didn't jump out on the box score, but when I was watching him, like he was just setting up the offense. You can definitely
that's
tell
what he
that,
does.
but even some of the Chris Paul stuff,
Mhm.
you can tell that that's starting to kind of seep into his game after, practicing with him for about a season and a half. He just looks even more honed and polished. But I mean, if we're going back to that Blake Trey conversation, I would still say that I'm at the same spot that I was. But on Wednesday, I was really noticing. I was like, dang, I can't lie. Trey looks better than he's been looking. But a lot of guys were in the supporting cast on Wednesday.
Right, right.
But to get to some of the other comments here, Mace says, what did you guys grade the game plan for the Grizz? They're a pace team, and shooting threes isn't a good plan because they will out-rebound us, especially with Jeremy out.
Yeah, that's kind of what we were talking about earlier, right? Is like
Mhm.
it's a good plan if our guys are going to hit our shots, but if we're if we're going to shoot less than 40% from three, it's not even worth trying it. We might as well just let Victor get inside and do our best to just be physical with them because we're not going to win the extra possession game against the Grizzlies.
Yeah, and we've got other guys who can go downhill like a Stephon or a Keldon to try to score inside
Yep.
as well. And obviously, if those guys are being inefficient, sometimes that's not the most effective thing. But again, going back to the game plan there, trying to go shot for shot with the Grizzlies with the injury situation right now is probably not
Mhm.
our best path to victory.
And unless we're just, we're honed in defensively and we're
Right,
able to make these rotations and actually not give up open threes, then maybe we can play that game.
right, right. Wemby's Castle, he says, I know it might not be much, but I'm finally writing articles and covering the San Antonio Spurs. It's been a dream of mine since I was a kid. I know off topic, but just wanted to say it. I'd love to see that Wemby's
Congratulations, buddy.
Castle. And I saw some of those on Twitter, man. I've read a couple of those. Shout out to you, man. I'm glad you're getting to do that and getting to talk Spurs and all that stuff because we love the Spurs just as much. And if y'all see my arm moving right here, it's just because my dog's begging for attention. So
In there.
got to keep him satisfied here. Um, let me see. Alrighty. I think that's pretty much all that we've got on this Memphis Grizzlies game tonight, Ethan. But the Spurs are at 19 and 20, which means we're 39 games into the season, which means by the time we talk next, we will probably be past the halfway point in the NBA season for the San Antonio Spurs. So we just kind of wanted, I know we just did the mid-season Christmas roster breakdown where we kind of talked about a lot of the things that the guys can get better at, but just overall on the team, what are some themes now that we're halfway through the season on the court that you've seen, negative or positive?
I think largely it's been positive. I think our IQ is way higher. Our chemistry is a lot better. Defensive intensity is there. When our team is healthy, you can see the cohesion, and we're actually able to win games. I mean, 19 and 20, like I had said in the last episode, if you had told me that
Mm-hmm.
last year this time, I'd be more than happy.
Right.
Like that is outstanding. I think where the frustration comes in and we start getting into negatives. I think I saw a stat today, and forgive me, I don't know the exact number here, but I think it was in games that we were leading going into the third or fourth quarter, we've lost like 15 of those, and where
Mm-hmm.
we've just completely unraveled in the second half execution. And if we had won those rather than lost, we would be second in the conference right now.
Wow.
So I think that's the level that we're at. We just need that extra step and that extra injection of maturity, if you will, to finally pull out these games and execute in late game situations. And that just comes with time. And I think patience. We're getting to that point. I think the second half of the year we'll start to see us winning more of those games. But that's definitely why I kind of empathize with some of Twitter when they're pissed off that we're 19 and 20 because it does feel like we should have a better record if you are watching the games like we are.
And I think the thing that adds to that, Ethan, the part that you were touching on at the end there, is that that's almost the same sentiment that we've had over the past 2 years as
Yeah.
well. As much as that was completely different, before Victor, but it felt like we were always just blowing the game in our hands. Like even in the 2022 season when we're tanking for Victor and Keldon's keeping us in games, you know what I mean? Which is why he averaged 22 points. And I know we've talked about this
Hmm.
so much for all you SSPN OGs, but in that season, even it felt like we were hanging around, but at the last moment we would just collapse.
Yeah.
And so when you have that same sentiment now, even though we're winning more games, that makes it even more frustrating. And I feel a little bit of that, but I
Hmm.
try to, and it's not to sit here on a pedestal and say that I know everything, but I try to take myself back and realize, hey, we were 22 and 60 last season. Like again, I forget what the number was, but I mean the number of wins that we're at now, like we didn't get 12 wins until like the end of January last year or something like that.
Hmm.
I can't remember. It might not have been 12, but I remember we talked about a certain double digit number when we got to like 11 wins or something like that around like November and December.
Right.
And I remember you mentioned that. And so that's the thing that you got to keep in mind. And it sucks too, because again, and we talked about this last episode, but with as good as Victor is, that's another thing that makes you want to like, oh man, like just make moves now because it feels like we can win these games now with how good he is. But the other thing that we've got to remember too is he's only going to continue to get even and even better. And I know there's two sides to that. The other side is, okay, that's another reason to accelerate the timeline.
Mm-hmm.
But the other side to that is that with how he improves, that's also going to make up for some of the losses that we've had this year with him getting better. Now, you don't want to just put everything on him. Like that second star conversation is true and it's legit, but we've got draft picks. You just don't want to rush that whole situation. And we've
For sure.
already talked about that. I don't want to repeat myself. We've made episodes on that before. But getting back to just where the Spurs are at the halfway point and things on the court that I think that they could get better at or continue to do good at. I think it really just goes back to incremental, improvements. I hate
Mm-hmm.
to just be basic, but that's really what we've seen this year. We're still seeing a lot of the same themes, but it's not as bad. So we're winning more games.
Right.
I know that's oversimplifying it, but you get what I'm saying?
Sometimes I feel like you need to oversimplify it because when you're in the details, like we are, unfortunately, every single day, you sometimes overanalyze some things, right? You're looking at advanced metrics, advanced stats on every individual player, every individual quarter, and you're like, where is the disconnection? Why aren't we winning these
Mm-hmm.
games? But if you really just zoom out and look at the standings and look at these teams just like 1-1, we're only 2.5 games away from the sixth seed. You know,
In year two.
in year two. The West today, compared to 2 years ago, is much more competitive. The
Yeah.
margin between seed 1 through really 11 is so slim. Like there have probably been like the Houston Rockets are 27-13. I don't think we're that far away from the Houston Rockets, if I'm being completely honest. I know they have Jalen Green, Alper, and Şengün. They're probably both going to be in discussions for All Stars. Maybe not Jalen, but Alper and Şengün, and they're second in the West. But I still, every game that we play against them, I'm like, the Spurs have a shot. We have a
Mhm.
real chance to win this game. Same against the Memphis Grizzlies. Same against the Denver Nuggets, the Clippers, the Lakers. OKC is kind of in a different echelon, but we're within grasp of the rest of these teams in the league. And to me, that's overwhelmingly positive compared to where we were the last 2 years.
In a 20,000-foot view, we've made significant improvements.
100%.
Yeah.
And we still have a couple contracts that are obviously negative that we're going to have to get off of in the next couple of years. I'm thinking of Zach Collins. I know that I see some negative comments about him. He won't
Mhm.
be here in 2 years. He might be gone next year. We don't know what the trade's going to look like, or the trade market's going to look like. We have 4 or 5 first round picks in the upcoming
That's
draft,
the
dude.
other thing I was gonna say too, and I didn't even get to that, but that's why it's like, when it comes to the whole trade discussion, it's like your
Hmm.
second look at how good Stephon Castle is this year, and everybody's saying that this year's draft, like even last year when we were talking about last year's draft, it even got brought up that like next year is supposed to be like significantly better. So if we can get somebody like Castle where we got him last year, imagine the value that we could get in this draft with potentially multiple picks and
Hmm.
what those guys could look like. But then again, with all of the picks that you have, maybe there is something that comes up, a move that you like where you can get a star that's relatively, young and fits your roster and fits the timeline. So there's a lot of options with the Spurs, but I think they're taking the we don't want to just sit here and say that, oh, the Spurs are perfect and doing everything right and there's nothing to criticize. But genuinely, in year two with Victor, this is the improvement that you wanted to see. There's still things on the court that are frustrating, that are similar storylines from years past that the Spurs can need to continue to work on and get better at. And roster wise, there are just some straight up upgrades that are going to have to happen at some point.
Hmm.
But as of right now, being at 500, man, in year two after another 22-60 season really is a solid place to be.
For sure. And I see MEC's comment. The Rockets do have better athletes just in general than the Spurs, and they are a better team. I don't want to be misunderstood in the comments. The Rockets are better than the Spurs. However, I think about what the Rockets looked like last year and the year before. They weren't this good. Ime Udoka has them playing the right way. It takes time, it takes energy, and they have a lot more uh, reps under their belt. Like, think about how bad Jalen Green was for the first 3 or 4 years
Yeah.
he was in the
Yeah.
league. Alper and Şengün was good, but a lot of people complained about him until this year as well. And then what's the guy that they drafted after we drafted Jeremy So? Tari Eason. He's playing a lot better this year. Last year he was really, really up and down. So these things kind of do take time. Um, yeah, and CP3 is definitely helping. And we
Same
don't have
thing with
Greg
the
Popovich.
HB.
We always forget. I mean, Greg Popovich is still the greatest coach of all time, and I'm
Yeah.
not. And no disrespect to Mitch Johnson, but things may be a little bit better if you have the most seasoned, most winningest
Yeah.
coach of all time on the bench, drawing up plays and talking to the players, especially in late game execution, which has really been our Achilles heel.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think you can overstate Pop's absence. I know he's older. I know he's at the tail end of his career, but that
Hmm.
doesn't change everything that he's done. Um, what was the other thing I was going to say? Oh, I just wanted to hit on what Mace said a little bit earlier. Harrison Barnes and Chris Paul are
Yeah.
also a huge factor to this as well. And I think we've seen some improvements and Stephon Castle for that matter. Really,
Yeah.
all three of those additions have been huge to improving the roster. Um, and all the stuff that Stephon or not, excuse me, not Stephon, all the stuff that CP3 and Harrison are doing for the rest of the roster off the court and even just teaching them things about the NBA, like with
Hmm.
Jeremy Sohan, calling them, Master Splinter and stuff like that. Like that is also stuff that, doesn't show up on the stat sheet that was value that was brought with those guys that I think is definitely helping,
Hmm.
translate to more wins.
And it really gets me excited about thinking of who's the next vet that we bring in, who's the guy
Right.
that we trade for or sign. Because as much as we both love Chris Paul and Harrison Barnes, in terms of veteran players that you'd bring to the team, those probably weren't on a lot of people's lists, right? When you
Mm-mm.
consider
No.
trades and free agent signings, but they've been tremendously impactful, like for all the reasons that you just said. So imagine when we get somebody that maybe has an all-star game recently
Right.
under his belt,
Right.
that'll be game changing.
Yeah, and same thing with the draft this year as
Mhm.
well. If we can get another rookie with similar or even more impact with what they're saying about the draft this year as a Stephon Castle
Yeah.
on top of, potentially another move that we could make with the amount of picks that we have, the door is wide open for the Spurs. The future for the Spurs is wide open. I know that's everybody already knows that. It's kind of been that way since we won the draft lottery for Victor, but
Mhm.
now it's really starting to come into shape. And with the improvements that we've seen so far this season, it's just continuing to keep those options open. And like you said, I think at the end of the day, it just gets me more excited to see what we bring in next or whatever decision we do moving forward. Also with the leaps too, like
Mhm.
with the way I know Jeremy's had some injuries this year, but what we've seen from Jeremy not having to play point guard, what's he going to look like next year with another leap? I know we're still looking for some of the other guys to make some jumps as well, but
Julian
Br-
Champagny?
duh. See, that's another. I knew I was forgetting a name because I wanted to say Devin as well, but obviously, there's a
Right.
lot of conversation with him right now. Although he is coming off two back-to-back 20-point games.
Yes.
But still, like a Julian Champagny, somebody who's 22 years old, and we'll see what he looks like next season. I could go on, but it will definitely be interesting to see what the rest of this season holds for the Spurs and then what the offseason holds for him after, Ethan.
I know, yeah, I know it's all speculation. I know Brian Wright has to do a lot of things correctly. The team
Hmm.
has to improve, like blah blah blah. But we're fans at the end of the day, Jude. And I don't think it's wrong to be really excited about what the future looks like.
Completely agree. Couldn't have said it better myself. You know what I will say though, Ethan? As much as we're about to wrap up this episode, the
Hmm.
Spurs are about to get going in almost an hour and 15 here on ESPN. Always love to see the Spurs on ESPN.
Right.
As much as I love my boy Sean Elliott and Jacob Toby, shout out Bill Land as well. We will always love you. Um, I'm always excited to see him on national TV. And
Right.
also, I'm excited because we got the trade deadline coming up as well. All Star weekend, the trade deadline, all that stuff is closer than we think, Ethan, as we get to
Hmm.
the halfway point of this season. So, as much as we're kind of going over some games, we were just kind of talking about overall stuff. There wasn't any crazy like new big Spurs news. We
Hmm.
are getting closer to the All-Star break as well as the trade deadline, so that will definitely be some. Even if the Spurs end up sitting pat and don't do anything, there will be some stuff to talk about and storylines that pop up for sure.
I know it's not going to happen, but I'm praying that Julian Champagny can get into the 3-point contest. I know it doesn't happen
Ooh,
anymore because they just put stars in there as it kind of should be, right? It should be exciting. But I feel like when we were kids, they put a lot of role players in there that their only job was to shoot threes because they were efficient, right? I think Kyle Korver, he was in it like all the time, not a star. JJ Redick,
Belly.
Marco Bellinelli won it for the Spurs in
Mhm.
14. Um, Julian Champagny's shooting what 43% from three. He's having a
Let me
great
see.
year. He's on an exciting team. I'm just hoping that being on the national stage finally will kind of get him to that point.
If Belly could get into the 3-point competition, eventually Champagny should be able to. So Champagny's he's at 37% right now, but he's
Oh,
also shooting. I think he's shooting we've talked about it though.
lately, he's shooting better.
He's shooting a career high in attempts though. That's the other thing that's some key
You
context
know
there.
what? It's a pipe dream. You can just tell me I'm wrong. It's not happening this year. But the
Down
Spurs
the
haven't
line,
had
down the line, maybe.
a guy in one of those two, like, in the 3-point shootout or the dunk contest, and it feels like decades.
Mhm.
Literally a decade. I think Marco was the last one to do it in 14. So I'm more excited for that almost than I am to get, like, Victor in the All-Star game.
Yeah, I'm definitely excited for Victor in the All-Star game, but
We know it's gonna happen.
I'm
Like,
not sure, yeah, and I'm not sure what the format is gonna look like. Hopefully, that'll make
it's
it more
weird.
fun,
It's
but,
weird. Have you not seen it?
we kinda have to I've seen I know it's 4 teams, right?
Yeah, it's gonna be 4 teams, and the 4th team is the winner of the Rising Stars tournament.
Yeah, 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 okay.
And it's I think, the other 3 teams are gonna be picked by, like, Kenny, Chuck, and Shaq, I believe. Or maybe it's like Candace, Chuck, and Shaq, something like that, you know what I mean?
This reminds me do you remember last year when Barlow was in the G League Next Up game?
Yes, I do.
So I was watching that, and actually, it seems like the format is semi-similar to what they did with that, where they have, like, multiple teams and they play pickup games to,
Yeah.
a certain score
That's
and
how the
stuff like
Rising
that.
Stars one was last year.
Yeah, right, right, yeah, that was the same format too, so anyways, we will see. But that will be some new news coming up in Spurs land, Ethan. Any final thoughts before we wrap this one up?
No, sir, I'm predicting a win. That's my guess.
Yes, sir. I will roll with that as well. We appreciate all you guys hanging out with us today. If you enjoyed the content, don't forget to hit that like and that subscribe button below. And if you want to stay updated with the show, follow us on X or Twitter, whatever you want to call it, at SSPN on YT, at Jude McLaren, and at Ethan_Quintero. We appreciate you guys. We'll catch y'all on the next one. Go Spurs, go.
Julian's good.